Welcome to the NCDWI Guide podcast, where defenders of the Constitution assemble to prepare for courtroom battle and firm owners gather to develop marketing strategies that will revolutionize the practice of criminal defense. Here's your host, the NCDWI guy, Jake Minnick.
Hello, fellow freedom fighters, and welcome to episode 190 of the NCDWI Guy podcast. On today's episode, I am sharing 10 life lessons that I learned this past weekend while running the Beast of the East 100-mile race. This is the fourth race-based episode, applying lessons learned from my recent dive into running, to life, into business. And so if you haven't listened to the prior episodes in the same vein, go back and take a listen to episode 101. That's the Marathon of Business. Episode 139, the Ultramarathon of Business. Episode 161 on mental aid stations, and then come back and listen to hopefully what will be of a gem of an episode here today. So I really had quite a amazing experience this past weekend running the Beast of the East. This is a 100-mile ultramarathon in Kings Mountain, Gastonia, North Carolina. A beautiful stretch of trail, about 20,000, I think right actually like at around 19,000 feet of elevation gain. So a good amount of kind of mountains and up and down trails. And it was just a beautiful weekend, great temperature, mid 50s through a lot of the time that I was on the trail. So just a wonderful experience. Got to go down there with my wife and her parents, my 7 kids. We had a friend of our teenage daughters that got to come along with us. We stayed at an Airbnb, made a weekend out of it, and it was quite the adventure. So I'm excited to share some life lessons that I learned. I got to do a little bit of bragging here because this was like kind of totally unexpected going into the race. This is my second 100-mile distance. I did one right at a year ago in December of 2022. So it's been a year actually since I've been involved in an actual race. This is my first race since that last one in December, and I came in third overall at the Beast of the East. So podiumed at the race, which was, again, shocking and pretty exhilarating when I discovered that. So finished a race in just over 24 hours and 17 minutes. The race started at 8 o'clock this past Saturday, 8 o'clock in the morning on December the 9th, and ended at for me at around 8 o'clock in the morning on December 10th. So just a wild and exciting weekend. And as always, and one of the reasons that I love running, and particularly now at this kind of like high mileage distance, is, to me, there are so many valuable lessons that can be learned from running that can be applied to life, to spirituality, to business, to building your mental game. There are just so many great takeaways. And so, again, I've shared a lot of running-based lessons on those prior episodes that I just discussed, and I've got 10 more headed your way here today. So, lesson number 1 learned from the Beast of the East. It's way easier, extremely easier doing something the second time around because you know that you can. This is just the reality of this situation. Again, I had done a 100-mile race in Daytona, going from Jacksonville to Daytona last December. And going into that race, I had kind of injured myself over the summer. My training kind of got thrown off. I never, in preparation for that race, went over 32 miles. So come race day, going 100 miles, the furthest that I'd ever run was, I think, right at maybe 33, 34 miles. And that was the tops of my training program. And so there was a real question in my head: can I actually do this? Can I actually go 100 miles? Will my body carry me that far? And it was completely unknown. It was a complete guess as to whether I could do that. And that caused a good amount of anxiety. I kind of went in with a little bit of low expectations of like, hey, maybe I don't finish the race. I'll learn something from it. But, just not knowing if I can go triple the furthest that I've ever run in my life is a big, kind of guessing game. And so I can remember just sleeping terribly the night before. I might have got like 2 hours of sleep the night before the race. Throughout the race, every time like something, started feeling off in my body, my feet, my legs, whatever it might be, it's like, okay, is this going to be the downward spiral of like basically, just me being on the side of the road? Unfortunately, as I shared back on episode 139, I was able to finish that race. But going into this race in Gastonia, there was no question that I could go 100 miles. And that was a huge mental advantage. Huge mental advantage. I knew that it would take a lot. You had 36 hours or maybe 34 hours to complete the race. I think it was 34 hours to complete the race. I knew it would take a real bad injury or mishap, which can definitely happen on an ultra run. So it wasn't like outside of the realm of possibility that something might go wildly off track and I would not be able to finish. But I knew that in all likelihood, I was going to be able to finish the race. And so that's a humongous mental advantage. I slept like a baby the night before this race. I probably got a solid 6, maybe 7 hours before this race. That's the best I've ever slept before any race that I've been involved in. And it's only been a handful, so there's not a lot of like past experience, but generally speaking, I've slept pretty crappy the night before a race. I felt great. Slept like a baby. I drank a beer the night before with friends. I've never done that in the past. Like I've been like very careful of like no alcohol. I was down in Gastonia. Uh, got to meet up in addition to going out to dinner with my family and my in-laws. Lance in our my partner in our Charlotte office, who's in the Gastonia office, came and had dinner with us. So it was fun chatting with him and catching up. Just did not feel anxious. I was excited about the race, but I didn't have that anxiety. And it really is, to me, it showcases the power of having a past success that you can build off of. If you know that you can do something, if you've already achieved what maybe seems impossible, your brain now says, "Oh, okay, well, we can do this. It's gonna happen. It's gonna take a long time. It might, it's there's gonna be pain and different things. You have to stay focused. You have to pay attention to ailments as they're coming up. You're gonna have to hydrate well and eat and all these things. I mean, there's still a lot of things that you have to pay attention to, but at the same time, when you have done something, it becomes wildly easier to replicate that. So, having said that, you can't go in overly cocky, right? You can be confident. That's the value of having a past win, is you're now confident. You don't want to go in overly cocky and just say, "Oh, I don't even need to train for this thing because I already did a 100-mile race, so I know I can do it. So what's the difference? I'll just come off the couch and go run 100 miles." No, obviously that's not going to work. But if you put in the same training, time, energy, and effort, and you're building off that past win, it just becomes so much easier to get that second ring, right? second championship. It becomes so much easier to make that, once you've reached the $100,000 plateau in your business, it becomes so much easier to achieve that again. And now maybe $1 million feels like just this impossible dream. And then maybe you hit $1 million and you're like, well, man, I could do that again. Like that, I figured out how to make that work. We replicate, we build on the success. It's going to be easier to hit that second million than it is the first. The first employee that you hire in your office, humongous leap of faith, right? Like, I mean, it's just this monumental difference not having anybody working for you and then having somebody working for you. Once you've done that, even if that person doesn't work out and now you're hiring a new person to replace that person, the second hire, whether it means that you now have two employees or you're replacing the first employee, it becomes so much easier to build your team because you've already gone through that process once. So, man, it is just a wild thing to realize. It was amazing to realize how much easier. And again, I'll talk about the difficulties of this race, but not having that unknown of, can I actually physically move 100 miles in approximately 24 hours? Is that a possibility? It's like, of course it's a possibility. It's already been a reality. So this is why it's so important to keep building on your successes, because your brain goes from thinking something is impossible to being like, oh yeah, we can do that. Let's go get it. It's time to put in the effort. And it just becomes easier to achieve the same result the more times that you have done it. So that first win, that first major hurdle, that first plateau is so hard to reach, but then hitting it again becomes much easier the second time around. Success breeds success, right? So lesson number one, it's way easier doing something the second time around. Lesson number two, you get out what you put in. You get out what you put in. This was a race that again, I hadn't done a race in a year. In 2022, I did 3 races, a marathon, 50K, and a 100-miler. In 2023, I did 1 race in December, and that was this 100-miler this past weekend. So, I had been building up to this particular race over about the last 4 months, really putting in a lot of elevation gain on my training, really kind of thinking about, okay, I'm prepping for this specific adventure that I'm going on. But there were kind of milestones that I wanted to have hit. I was, at times, my training program had me putting in, and this was one that I developed personally to me. I didn't pull this off the internet or anything, but 60, 65, 75 miles in a week. And I'll tell you right now, I very rarely was hitting those mileage goals. Very rarely. And that kind of, to some extent, was a little bit disappointing. It was something where I felt like when I would miss a run, it was like, man, you can't make that up. There's only so many hours in a week. You have to have a certain amount of recovery time between each run, or at least, I kind of had planned for that. There are certain days that I knew that if I didn't get a morning run in, it wasn't going to happen for the rest of the day because the schedule was full. And so that kind of mentality started to build a little bit of like, man, you're putting yourself behind, you're putting yourself behind, you're putting yourself behind. One thing I would like to say about that is that sometimes there are more important things in life than the goals that we are shooting for. No matter how grand and big and good that they are, there's sometimes more important things. And I feel like there was a number of things over the past few months in my life that reminded me that running isn't the most important thing. It's not the most important thing in my life. I love it. I get a lot of energy out of it, a lot of joy. It is great mentally and spiritually for me, but it's not the most important thing in my life. And so, if there are legitimate tugs away from time that is spent running, then instead of getting disappointed, frustrated, psychologically beating myself up about that, it's okay to just say, look, there's other things that I am required to do right now. There's things that I need to get done in order to host the Freedom Fighter Summit. There are things that need to get done in order to help grow the law firm. There are things that need to get done as a husband and as a father. There are things that need to get done on the home front. There are other more important things than running, as much as I love that. And so there was something that, again, that became a little bit of a freeing thought in the final weeks leading up to the ultra marathon. It's like, again, I felt like I was leaving something on the table because I had not put in the work that I wanted to put in. But at this particular chapter of life, that was okay. That was okay. And it's somewhat motivating to know that I left something on the table, because that's motivating moving forward to say, okay, if I was able to do what I did this past weekend at the Beast of the East, then there's opportunity, plenty of opportunity for growth, given the missteps, the missed training runs that occurred during this particular race buildup. So it's about learning. It's about, making sure that you're not overly focused on one area of your life and, losing relationships, putting yourself in a bad place from a business perspective. It's important to really focus on what needs your time and attention. Again, at the same time, there's no shortcuts. So, as much as I would have loved to have the benefit of putting in those training runs, and there would have been additional benefit on the course to putting in those training runs, it was a reminder as well that there is no shortcuts. I realized I couldn't make up those muscle builds, those aerobic distances that I was missing out on during the training runs. And so you can't take shortcuts. If I had put in that additional training, would I have likely had a better time? Yes. And that's okay. I realized that that wasn't where the energy needed to go, but it's always a good reminder in important, big dreams that we cannot take shortcuts. There's no easy way to reach a difficult goal. Don't expect that. And it's okay if you don't reach the goal this go around. Take your lumps, figure out what went wrong, figure out what you could do better, and make it work the next time. So lesson number 2, you get out what you put in. You can't skimp on the prep. And sometimes there's more important things than your big dream, at least for the moment. Okay. All right. So that was actually a lot of lessons packed into one. So that's lesson number 2. Lesson number 3, don't get lost. Stay on the path. Now, the Daytona run last year was pretty easy. There was not a lot of course variation. It was a pretty straight shot from Jacksonville down to Daytona, difficult to get lost. This course in the middle of the woods was a little bit different, and there was some poor course markings on the course. Overall, a really well marked course, but there were some poor course markings. There was heavy fog at times, downpour that we'll talk about a little bit later, that made it difficult to see the markings on the course and to make sure that you were staying on the path. And so very early on in the race, as I was coming out of the main aid station in Wolf's Den, I got turned around, headed back up to the main trail, and ended up running a little bit of extra mileage because I got twisted around and I got off the course. Fortunately for me, there was enough other people that were kind of experiencing the same thing that I kind of joined up with two other runners that went the same wrong way. We got back on course, and I don't think that we probably ran more than like a quarter to a half a mile extra than we otherwise would have. But even that little bit of distance, as you're thinking about, the fact that you're just out there wasting energy early on in an extremely long and fatiguing race, was psychologically damaging. It was incredibly difficult to be, thinking during those, few minutes, like, man, where are we going? Where am I supposed to be? Do these guys I'm kind of now like following, running with, do they have any idea where they're going? I mean, it really was like, this is not good. Like, I mean, at that point, it's like, I don't know what the course is going to be like up ahead. I don't know if I'm going to, um, if we don't get this figured out sooner than later, start having to worry about how much fluids are going to be an issue if I am going to run out of, my hydration. It really kind of like played on me, even though it was short. Later on the course, after about probably 50 miles or so, this may have actually been like right before 50, but it was pretty deep into the race. I passed a runner going in the opposite direction that was about 2.5 to 3 miles out from the last aid station. And he basically had told the runner just ahead of me, I went the wrong direction. I missed the aid station. I got to go back. So this guy was having to turn around and effectively put an additional approximately 5 miles in because he wanted to make sure that he wasn't going to get like penalized for not having checked in at the last aid station. I don't know if it would have been me, I might have just like tried to ask for, some sort of a course variation or something at on the way back in, and just like run the same aid station loop like twice, because he was literally like more than halfway on to the next aid station. I mean, it was just brutal, like hearing him be like, I got to turn around and go back. I mean, it was just like heartbreaking. I went on to the next aid station. I came back about 2 to 2.5 hours later. I see him really not far from the place that we had met the first time, because it's an out and back course. And so you're kind of passing the same people multiple times, probably, depending on their distance and their pace. Sometimes, runners, you're passing 7 or 8 times throughout the race. But I passed him on the way back, and I was just like, man, that just sucks. I mean, for you, I'm, just, you know, can't get over thinking about how much that sucks. And he seemed to have like a pretty dang positive outlook. I saw him later on the course looking strong, so I'm hopeful that he finished, because that just would have been mentally brutal. And so, from the point that I missed that course marking early on in the race and had to run a little bit of extra distance, from that point forward, I basically said, look, I don't want to have to take any more steps than necessary. So as much as I kind of want to go as fast as I possibly can, at certain points in the course where it's either difficult to see the markings or I'm not clear on which way I'm supposed to be going, I am going to take the time to make sure that I'm going in the right direction, because the wasted energy is so emotionally and psychologically fatiguing that I don't want to be in that headspace. So I just made a commitment. I'm going to really take my time on the portions of the course where the markings were difficult to follow, to make sure that I was on the right path. And in life, that is just so true. In business, that is so true. We want to go 100 miles an hour all the time, but sometimes you have to slow down and make sure that you have your bearings. Sometimes you have to slow down and make sure that you are on course, because you can be going as fast as you want to, but if you're going in the wrong direction, then you're definitely not going to reach your goal. In fact, you're moving away from your goal as opposed to moving towards it. So you could be going 100 miles an hour, but if you're going east when you're supposed to be going north, you are getting further and further and further away from your destination with each step that you are taking at lightning speed. So I just think it's a good mental reminder that sometimes we need to inhale, take a deep breath, get our bearings again, make sure that we are moving in the right direction, and then take that next step. Be deliberate, be thoughtful, be intentional, be purposeful with each step in your business, each step in life. And it doesn't mean that you just have to get, this, what's it called? Decision fatigue, where you're just bogged down. But it is a good idea to take these breaks and make sure that we are on course. And this is why, as I've suggested so many times on the podcast, that I think it's incredibly important to regularly schedule a time to work on your business instead of in it. In your personal life, it's important to spend time regularly working on your life instead of in the daily routine of life, because that's what allows us to keep our bearings. That's what allows us to make sure that our daily routines, our habits, our, kind of daily grind is moving us in the right direction. You often hear this kind of like saying of work smarter, not harder. And I am a humongous fan of hard work. I think hard work ethic is so incredibly important. But the mentality behind work smarter, not harder is make sure that your hard work is getting you where you want to go. Don't waste the hard work. If you're going to put in blood, sweat, and tears, make sure that you're doing it so that you reach the end goal that those blood, sweat, and tears are attempting to accomplish, right? Don't waste the blood, sweat, and tears. Make sure that you are taking the right path. So, number 3, don't get lost, stay on the path. Number 4, fuel properly. One of my running heroes, who I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a second, Chad Wright, is got a really cool podcast, great video on YouTube called 1 Mile Out, documenting his recent race at the beginning of this year, doing the Cocodona 250 miler. And I heard Chad Wright on a podcast several months back talking about his approach to the Cocodona 250. And what he said is that most people think that this 250-mile race is a running competition. And he's like, it's not a running competition, it's an eating competition. The person that is able to put the most fuel in their body is going to have the best chance of succeeding, because you have to be able to replenish the calories that you are burning up through the race. You don't want to run out of gas. You don't want to run out of gas on your way through this massive endurance event. So my mentality really kind of changed with that thought process of, I want to make sure I'm fueled properly. When I went into the Daytona 100 last year, I was convinced, based on podcast and research that I had done, that I could do the race on gels, do the race on, gels and a few protein bars, but primarily gels. And by about mile 80, I was sick of the gels. I was out of gas. I finally, like towards the very end of the race, got like a quesadilla that somewhat brought me back to life. But I realized going into this thing, I'm not going to be able to survive on gels. So I figured to myself, I'm going to try to eat as much as I possibly can eat and see how far I can go with the additional fuel. And so let me give you a little bit of a taste of what I was eating during this race. So I started off the day with eggs and a bagel. So I had some scrambled eggs, had a bagel with cream cheese on one side, butter on the other. And here's what I ate to the best of my recollection during the race. I'm sure I'm missing some things. I might be slightly off in terms of portions or whatnot, but during the race, I think over the 24-hour period, um, in addition to the breakfast that I had that morning, I had 8 pieces of bacon, a double bacon cheeseburger, a peanut butter sandwich, a hot dog, 4 cups of soup, a grilled cheese sandwich, 4 bananas, a handful of chips, approximately 15 cookies, a gummy snack pack, several handfuls of candy, several handfuls of peanut butter pretzels, a cup of mashed potatoes, a pancake with syrup, mini muffins, 2 pieces of meat lovers pizza, and then plenty of water, ton of water, Tailwind, and Coke at a couple of the stops. But a pretty ridiculous amount of food in terms of a normal day's consumption. But again, my goal was, I have got to be putting back into the body what is going out um, through these burned calories, and it made an incredible difference. I didn't feel nauseous the entire race. I never got I never started feeling sick. My stomach never started feeling funky. Didn't really have any GI issues, which a lot of runners experience. So I'm super grateful for that. Like, I mean, I just, I'm really, there was no necessarily rhyme or reason to what I was eating. It was like, hey, what's gonna feel good? I didn't go into this race with like a nutrition plan in terms of like, here's the amount of calories I want to put in per hour. It's like, I'm just going to pick up as much food as I feel like I can put into my body at each aid station, and that really paid off. And again, I'm pretty fortunate on that front. Again, I don't know if that'll work again in the future, but at least for this go around, it did. And so it reminded me that you know in most of our endeavors, we need to make sure that we are fueling properly. Again, from the outside perspective, what is the Beast of the East 100 miler? Oh, it's a run. It's an ultra run. No, according to Chad Wright, it's an eating competition, right? Because if you're not putting the fuel in the body, then you're not going to succeed. And plenty of people can't complete the race or don't complete it in time or feel miserable during the race because they're not fueling properly. It is an eating competition. And so this got me thinking about other areas in life where this is true. Certainly in faith, right? For the Christian, for me as a Christian, what is maybe kind of like our goal? Well, our goal is to spread the gospel. Ultimately, the goal for every Christian is to get to heaven. But certainly, like one of the things that you would say, a good Christian is trying to do is bring other people to know Jesus Christ, to bring other people the good news. But how are you doing that? Well, you have to be fueling properly. And as a Roman Catholic, the source and summit of the Christian life, according to our faith, is the Eucharist. It is the meal. It is the food that we are uh, taking into our bodies, Jesus Christ himself, that we believe that we are receiving in the Holy Eucharist. It is the liturgy of the word, devouring, taking in, soaking in the lessons from scripture and actually incorporating those things into our very being. So are we uh, taking in those calories, so to speak, that are necessary then for being able to put out into the world the good news? Are we receiving the message in the word? Are we receiving Jesus himself in the Eucharist? Our faith is based around a meal, even though we are called to go and make disciples of all nations, it begins in the Eucharistic celebration, in the meal that we celebrate together, and the sacrifice of the mass. And so, in spiritual life, that's definitely true. In business, that is also true, right? It might seem like, well, how do you run a good business? Well, you go into your office and you do what you do in an office, right? You type at your computer, you talk to other coworkers, um, you work hard for clients. But again, that is really not how you become a great business person. That's how you become a good technician. How do you become a great business person? Well, you consume information that is good for a businessman or businesswoman. You soak in business books, marketing books, podcasts on business. You talk to other business business people in the community. You talk to other leaders in the community. This is how you become a better business person, by consuming those things that are going to help you do that. You can't just go in and run the business, so to speak. You have to be constantly feeding information on how you can be doing things better. So take a look in your life how you are fueling your goals. What are your goals? What are your personal goals, your spiritual goals, your mental goals, your physical goals? And how are you fueling those things? As we come into the new year, into January, and people start setting up their exercise plans, going into January 1st, or I'm going to read 100,000 books this year, whatever it might be, whatever your big goal is, the question is, how are you going to fuel that goal? Sit down. I mean, you've really got to think about, how are you going to fuel that goal? If you want to be in shape, if you want to, lose weight, if you want to get on an exercise program, if you want to become a better a parent, a better business person, if you want to grow in your faith, you've got to figure out, what things am I going to have to feed myself, whether that's, real or existential. What things am I going to feed myself in order to make this a reality, to make this dream a reality? If you're eating the wrong way and your goal is to get better, in better physical shape, you're killing your dream. You got to figure out what is going to fuel the goal that you're shooting for. So, lesson number 4, fuel properly. Lesson number 5, inspire others in order to up your own game. Inspire others in order to up your own game. Now, going into this 100-miler a couple weeks before, I wasn't necessarily feeling very excited. I was looking forward to the race, and I was looking forward to running and kind of having that time, but I wasn't really inspired to do the race. And about a week, really like right out a week before the race, it was originally just going to be me and my wife going down to the race. I had already booked a Holiday Inn, one room at the Holiday Inn for her and I to stay at. She was going to help, crew me throughout the race. And it was just going to be the two of us. My in-laws were going to stay at home. And somehow the Sunday before we were scheduled to go down, we were down at my in-laws' house, and we just started talking. And it was like, hey, what if the kids came down and were able to, we made a weekend out of it, and we let them kind of participate, and they got to see this. And it just lit me on fire. I was like, what would this mean if my kids got to see, their dad working hard on the course, doing something very difficult, getting to see other men and women out on this course doing something extremely difficult, and really pushing the limits of their human potential. What would that do for my kids? And the answer to that question really remains to be seen at this point. I know it had an impact on my kids. My oldest son, Manuel, stayed out with my father-in-law and my wife throughout the entire night. He probably slept for about 4 hours in the car. but he was out there helping me refill my water bottles. It was super cool having him out there participating and watching the runners come in and out. And so my kids were there at the starting gun. They arrived. Most of my family, my wife and my father-in-law and my son were there at the finish line. The rest of them arrived like 2 minutes after the finish, so they were able to celebrate the finish. They didn't get to actually see the finish itself, but they were there right at the end. But they also came and met me at several aid stations, and it was just so cool having my 7 children cheering like "Go Dad!" Like, I mean, it was really emotional. It was something that was unexpected in terms of the impact that had. And from the Sunday before the race until we went, we booked an Airbnb last second. I canceled the reservation at the Holiday Inn. And from that moment, it was like in my brain, even though I was going into my taper week, it was like game on. My kids are going to be out here watching me. And I promised myself, I was like, I'm going to look strong coming into every aid station and going out of every aid station. I'm not going to let them see pain. I don't care how bad that I am feeling. I want them to see their dad as a strong figure. I want them to see me really, whatever pain I'm experiencing, I want them to see me. And so that the mindset really changed because of my desire to motivate and to inspire my children. And so it's important, I feel like, to do things that you think may inspire others. And there's so many opportunities for this to happen. Maybe it is, giving, literally just handing $5 to a homeless person on the side of a street, and letting the car behind you, even if they don't know you, see that happen. You just don't have any idea the impact that this might have on somebody else's life. You know, in business, reaching out to other lawyers that seem like they need a helping hand, setting the bar high in your local bar and being the attorney that is inspirational in terms of the passion and intentionality that you're bringing in the courtroom, the way that you're preparing your case. You just have no idea what that is doing for young lawyers that are sitting in the gallery saying, that's the person I want to be like. And so if you can kind of remember that in the back of your head, that everything that you are doing may be touching lives, I think it can really help to push us in the right direction. Again, I would have still gone out hard on this course if my kids weren't there, but knowing that they were there watching and knowing that they were there waiting at the next aid station had a humongous emotional lift. And so there's other places in life, again, whether it's faith, in terms of your mental game, whatever it might be, there's other areas in life where if we are trying to really, change ourselves, I think we want to be doing things that can be seen to inspire other people. We're just automatically going to be uplifted by knowing that we are touching other people's lives. We are meant as human beings to help other people, to live in community. And so when we are improving, inspiring, bettering other people's lives, it's going to have a tremendous uplift on our own game and help us to achieve the goals that we have set for ourselves. So number 5, inspire others in order to up your game. Number 6, and this is somewhat related, identify heroes. Identify your heroes because you may meet them or become them. Identify your heroes because you may meet them or become them. Now, when I was going back to episode 161, mental aid stations, right? My son and I, we volunteered at an aid station during the Hellbender 100-mile race. And I got inspired during that race. I saw some people that were some inspirations to me. Tim Nooney, Jonathan Eibach, they were at the beginning, they basically number one and two in the race. And so I started following them and a couple of other kind of local heroes, local badass runners in Asheville. After that race, I started following them on Strava. I would, look at their runs, see what their pacing was, look at their heart rate, and it's incredible looking at top athletes. If especially, depending on where you are in your running journey, or again, this applies to other areas of life, lawyering, being a business person, being a husband, being a father. When you see people that are operating at an incredible level, that are just kicking butt in whatever arena that they are working in, it really is inspiring. And so, I think there's two ways that the mindset could be like. You could look at somebody on Strava that is clearly a way better athlete than you are and be like, oh man, I'm never going to be able to achieve that. It's, I don't know how that's possible. This is hopeless, right? Or you can look at it and be like, man, this is incredible. What are they doing? How often are they running at, aerobic level? Are they running above aerobic level? What does their pacing look like? How much elevation gain are they doing? How much is that impacting their heart rate? I got in there and really started regularly looking at some of these runs. And so what I was doing mentally by not getting overwhelmed or frustrated by looking at these incredible athletes was saying, basically showing myself, what does great look like? If you want to be really good at something, you got to find the people that are great at it and basically say, what are they doing? Where is the bar set? How do I figure out how to get to the same place that this person is at? And I'm not at their level, so I'm not even going to pretend to be like, and I achieved exactly what these incredible runners achieved. But I think it helped me push the envelope in the right direction because I saw what great looked like. So you got to find your heroes, and I really I feel like tweaked my own running strategy and setting my own expectations and goals based on what greatness was looking like. In addition, as I already previously mentioned, Chad Wright is one of my running heroes. He is a former Navy SEAL. He has a very popular YouTube channel. He is constantly preaching the message, Christian guy, through doing difficult endurance events, especially running. And so as I was out there on the course, I was coming back on the first out and back loop. You basically go out and back in one direction, come back to center, and then out and back in the other direction, come back to center, and then repeat that 4 times over throughout the race at the Beast of the East. But as I was coming back on the first out and back, I saw somebody. I was like, man, that looked like Chad Wright. I was like I mean, he's got very, if you want to liven up your day, look up Chad, Chadd, Wright, and take a look at some pictures. And this was the dude that I saw running past me on the course. Pretty easy guy to recognize. And so I passed him. I was like, man, that looked like Chad Wright. The next time that I saw him, I was like, that is definitely Chad Wright. And so I gave him a slap on the shoulder and I was like, Chad, man, I love what you're pushing out there. You great message. And he was, so kind and positive, and he was just like, God bless you, brother. And so every time I passed him from there on, I was like, Chad Wright's on the course. I mean, it just like kind of blew my mind because this is somebody that I've seen on YouTube. And running is one of those cool spaces where you really can be in the same race as some of your heroes. When you look at people that run, the Chicago Marathon or the New York City Marathon, races, other even, lesser known races all around the country. Literally everybody that you're running with some of the best athletes on planet Earth. You're in the same competition. This doesn't happen in football. Like, you don't get to go take the field with Tom Brady. You don't get to go take the field, with LeBron James, get on the court with LeBron James. That's just not how most, big sports work. But in the running world, you can be, running the same course at the same time in the same race as some of the top athletes on planet Earth. And that's pretty cool. And so just seeing Chad out there and being like, man, this is one of my running heroes that I am passing, back and forth on this course. And, he's just, giving out positive energy. It was really cool. And so I think, you need to identify good heroes in your life. If you are trying to become a better business person, find those heroes, right? Find the people that you think are like you look up to. It's been an amazing journey on this podcast because of the caliber of lawyers that Jake Minnick has gotten to talk to just by having this podcast and seeking out greatness, seeking out lawyering greatness. I have gotten to talk with some of the top DWI lawyers, some of the top criminal defense lawyers in the state and outside of it, because of the fact that I'm just trying to get better, because I have the right heroes in this space. Same thing is true in the spiritual realm. If you want to get closer to God, if you want to have, a higher level of spirituality, you got to find people that are doing it, that seem to have that good relationship. If you want to be a better husband, a better father, you got to have role models that you are like, man, that dude is doing something right. That lady is kicking ass. Like, how can I be like that person that is setting the standard seemingly so high, that is getting it done? And a lot of times I think they're making it look easier than it actually is, right? And that's why it's important to go after those people, to get into the weeds, to study the details, to try to take that person out for coffee and be like, hey man, how are you cranking like this? How are you this incredible leader that you are? How are you this incredible lawyer that you are? How are you this incredible wife that you are? I mean, these are the kind of things that we really need to spend time unpacking, because success always looks easier from the outside than it is for the person that is making it happen. So if you want to become successful, you got to learn those secrets. And the best way to do that is to identify the right heroes, because you may meet them or hopefully become them. Number 7, take time to fix small issues. Huge lesson that was learned. And this is something that I went into this race with a mindset of being very conscious about. But take time to fix small issues. On a 100-mile race, a couple of pebbles in your shoes over a 5-mile run, it's like, I'm not going to get too worked up about that. But on a 100-mile race, you better get those pebbles out of your shoes. There was a couple of times when, my around mile, I think like 34, my right big toe started feeling like a blister was developing. And I was like, at the next aid station, I'm feeling strong. Legs are feeling strong. I feel like I could keep running, but I better take my shoe off, figure out what's going on, and see if I can fix this up. So took my shoe off. There was a blister developing. I put some Vaseline on my feet so it wouldn't hopefully rub anymore. I put a Band-Aid over the blister, and fortunately didn't get any worse. I could still feel it, but it didn't get any worse. Got just some crazy flooding towards the end of the race that I'll talk about here in a few minutes. But my my shoes got soaked basically during the last stretch of the race. And as I went into the last aid station before the finish line, I hadn't changed my shoes the entire course. I hadn't changed my socks in about 60 miles. There's only 5 miles left. And I was like, you know what? And this was as it was still raining and it had just been pouring. I knew I was likely going to go back through a bunch of puddles, but I was like, I know I've got like 2 miles before the worst part of the course. I'm going to change my shoes right now and get 2 miles of my feet, being dry, clean. I'm going to make sure that I finish the race. And ultimately, the rain cleared up, and that last 5 miles, I got to run in those, dry socks and new shoes, and my feet felt great. And it was an incredible decision. A bunch of times I had to use Vaseline, had to use it on my back, had to use it on my feet. Um, uh, I'll use it. I used it in unspeakable places that we won't get into. But there was times when I was like, I really need to make sure that I'm applying the Vaseline, uh, uh, make sure that I'm not just ignoring this rubbing because it's only going to get worse. It's only going to be something that continues to devolve. You've got to, sit down as you kind of go into, I had to sit down and as I went into each aid station, make sure that I was getting the proper gear for, whether it's nighttime is coming up or we've got rain going on. So I need to get a rain jacket. My hands are starting to get cold. So I want to have a pair of gloves. Do I have the right fuel and liquid going out of this aid station? There was a bunch of different things that I had to really sit down, think through, and make sure that I had the appropriate equipment and took the time to fix these kind of like seemingly small issues. And it's so important to fix small issues when you are doing an endurance event, when you are doing a big goal, when you are working on a long-term project, business, lawyering, life. These are things that are not done over a weekend. They are built over a long period of time. And so you need to make sure that you are intentionally identifying and fixing seemingly small issues. Because if you do not, if you put your head into the sand, if you ignore the small issues, if you expect that they are going to work themselves out on their own, you are going to be in big trouble. Those small issues will become a big problem. A leaky pipe is likely not going to fix itself. But if it goes unaddressed, a leaky pipe can lead to a flooded basement. Right. So you can sit down and be like, okay, well, we got a leaky pipe down here. Let's just go ahead and take 3 hours, get this thing figured out and knock it out. Or you can be like, you know what, it's not that bad. Maybe it'll go away. And you come back down a week later and your basement has 2 feet of standing water in it. And so many of us do this in our business. I'm really bad about this. I'm really bad about, addressing small problems and really tackling them head on. And it's such an important thing to focus on if you want to make sure that your big dreams do not get derailed. If you really want to have a business that is operating, functioning at an incredibly high level, if you want to have, a spiritual life, a family life, a lawyer life that is operating at a high level, don't ignore the small things, right? Call your client back. If an employee in your office has a question, answer the question. If your husband or your wife asks you to do something, get it done. Don't just let it sit there and fester. If there's a problem to be addressed, get it knocked out. Because normally it doesn't take that long to address. It's kind of crazy because, there's this like kind of like thought process of, oh, I've got a couple pebbles in my shoe on this run. should I take my shoe off? What does it take? Like 25 seconds to take my shoe off and then put it back on and tie it up again to get those rocks removed. And by taking that 25 seconds, I have probably, maybe just saved myself the race. Certainly potentially saved myself a lot of discomfort and pain over the next, 65 miles, over the next 14 hours, 25 seconds. But this is something that we do all the time in life. We say, oh, that's not that big a deal. Oh, it'll get better on its own. Don't have to worry about that. And that's just not the right mindset. If there's an issue to be dealt with, get it dealt with early. Don't let it multiply. Don't let the issue compound. I'm going to try to do a better job in my own life on this front because this is something that I generally have not been great at, is addressing small issues before they start to compound. I have a very optimistic view on life, which I think is a good thing, but I sometimes think that problems are going to take care of themselves, that issues are going to go away if you just ignore them, don't respond, don't follow up. And that's not the situation. It's not a good standard to set for your family. It's not a good standard to set for your team. It's not a good standard to set in your community. And it's not a good standard to set for yourself. So take time to fix small issues. Number 7. Number 8, don't refuse help, especially on the journey to big goals. Don't refuse help, especially on the journey to big goals. Going into this race, I knew that there was a good amount of aid stations. This was a really well equipped course in terms of they had a great volunteer staff, a very high energy group of volunteers, aid stations every 4 to 5 miles, which for a trail race is really awesome. I mean, there's trail races where you're going, 15, 20 miles between checkpoints, between aid stations. And so you got to make sure that you have everything you need before you head out of an aid station, because you may not be seeing another human for 6 hours. And in this case, approximately about 2 hours at the most between aid stations. And so made it a very doable course in terms of having a lot of opportunities to kind of get fuel, to get help, to kind of take a moment, have a seat, whatever it might be. There was plenty of aid stations. So in my brain, I was thinking, well, I don't want to put Laura out and, have her driving back and forth between aid stations. Maybe she should just stay at the hotel and sleep, or stay at the Airbnb and sleep, or just, stay at the main aid station and not be driving back and forth. So I kept telling her this, like, hey, there's going to be a lot of aid stations along the way. You just, get rest. I don't want both of us to be wrecked coming out of this weekend, and we still got to take care of the kids. And I mean, it's going to be, somebody needs to kind of be mentally coherent. And fortunately for me, Laura's like, I want to be there at every aid station. Want to make sure that you're, looking good, looking strong mentally, that you have everything that you need. And she is such an organizer, my wife. She had everything, in this this bag that we normally use when we go back and forth to the beach. So like a big beach basket, but it had everything in like Ziploc bags, like super organized. At every aid station, she was, brought that out, was ready to go. If I needed something, it was, right there. And man, did that make a humongous difference. It made a difference having her checking in with me and having her there to encourage me at every aid station, but just having the additional support and somebody else helping me like think through, hey, what do I need for this next stretch of course, was a huge advantage. And she kept saying, like, I'm coming out, and I like kept being like, oh, you don't need to do that. I kept trying to refuse that help, and that help made a massive difference. Would I have finished the course without without her and my father-in-law and Manuel being there at like almost every aid station? Because my father-in-law was there too, supporting and helping fill up my water bottles. My son was as well. Without the three of them, would I have been able to finish the race? I would have been able to finish the race. Would I have done it the same time? Likely not. Would I have done it in the same like physical condition? I would have felt a lot worse, I'm sure, if I had not had that additional help. So when somebody is offering help, when somebody is offering charity, when somebody is offering their compassion, their love, their assistance, you know, most of the time it's a generous thing to do and a good thing to say yes. Because when we're looking to accomplish big things, we're going to need help. We're just going to need help. That's just the lay of the land. If you want to do big things, if you want to accomplish big goals, you got to do it with a team. If you want to go fast, as the saying goes that I've shared on the podcast, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, right? And in an endurance race, it's all about distance. It's all about going far. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So if you want to go far in life, if you want to go far in business, don't go it alone. When you got people offering to help, when you got people that are going to offload some of the heavy lifting to achieve that big goal, take advantage. Take advantage of that team. Those people in your life that are trying to help you achieve great things, or the people in your life that you're trying to help achieve great things. Go offer that assistance. Go offer that help. That's how great things get done. So number 8, don't refuse help, especially on the journey to big goals. Number 9, soak in the gnarly experiences life sends your way. So about 95 miles into this race, I came into the Wolf's Den aid station, actually 90 miles into this race. I came into the Wolf's Den aid station, had 10 miles left, and basically picked up my one and only pacer, my good friend James Rizell, who is the amazing photographer and videographer. He did the Freedom Fighter Summit. Great guy. Just super, super fun guy to hang out with. We've done a lot of runs recently in the Asheville area. We did one on the day before Thanksgiving recently. I mean, just a cool dude, and funny and uplifting. And so James came out to pace me for the last 10 miles. And as we were getting ready to go out of Wolf's Den, it had been sprinkling off and on throughout the entire race, but the rain really started coming down, And then the lightning kicked in. Thunder was like, crashing nearby. I mean, it started getting gnarly, but there was one section of the course, rock top, from Wolf's Den going into the Linville aid station. And it was over, this just, you're basically climbing up rocks to get on top of rock top. And then once you get up there, even in the daylight, it's really an impossible place to run, because you're basically moving along boulders, rocks, you're moving in and out of ruts. Like, I mean, it just is an unrunnable section of the course. Earlier in the day on Saturday, I'd gone up there. Actually, this was probably late Saturday evening after dark. It was foggy. You could barely see on this section of the course the flags marking the direction to go. I mean, it probably took me 25 minutes to move a mile up on that section of the course, just because of the way that it was just difficult to see, and the footing and all of the boulders and rocks. And, it's not for running, right? There's a lot of great running sections of the course. That was not it. So about 4:30, we are heading out of Wolf's Den to go up on the rock top, and the rain is just pouring down. And when we get on the rock top, it is just downpour. I mean, there is literally like river running through the rock. I mean, the water, at first you're trying to like kind of like dodge the pools, and then you just are like, this is stupid. I'm just going to step in, and it's ankle deep water as we're moving through sections of that rock top section, just impossible to see because of the downpour. You're jumping, on slippery rocks from one section to the next. And we passed a couple of runners coming in the opposite direction. You see their headlamp coming towards you. And uh, one guy, and I think this just described it, was just like, this is fucking insane. I mean, and it was. I mean, that's as he passed, he was just like, this is totally, totally mental, and it was. I mean, it was totally mental up there, and the I don't know if it was because we were so close to the end. Maybe I would have thought about this differently if it had been earlier in the race. But at this point, it was kind of like, I told James, I was like, man, you may have only been able to join me here for the last, 10 miles, but you're getting your money's worth. Like, this is definitely the most gnarly section of the course, in terms of, even though I had run over that section of the course several times throughout the race already, it was a different section at that moment because of that downpour. And so he got to experience the gnarly section of the course. And in my brain, I was like, this is what I signed up for, right? I signed up to do something challenging, to run 100 miles. So why not soak in this experience of, pretty sucky conditions, pretty like wild and ridiculous weather conditions, and just realize, man, this is pretty insane what is happening right now. And I think when we experience hard things in life, we do two things that don't serve us. One is that we tell us that hard things shouldn't happen. And that's just not life. We know, all of us know in the back of our minds, that life is going to be tough. Life is hard. There's going to be challenging things that we have to get through in life. So the more we say, man, it shouldn't be this hard. This is hard. Like, I mean, whatever's going on in my life, my family situation, my finances, my job, my relationship with this person, whatever it might be, the death in my family that I just experienced, this disease that I'm dealing with, whatever it might be, life is hard. We pretend like it's not supposed to be. And life is going to be hard. There's going to be a lot of suffering in life. So we shouldn't lie to ourselves and be like, man, it's not going to be hard. The other thing we have a tendency to do is we have the tendency to buffer in tough times. Instead of embracing the suck, we resort to social media, to alcohol, to TV, Netflix, whatever it might be, cigarettes, sweets. It doesn't matter, whatever the buffering source is. We tend to go into this place of, let me find something that makes me feel good, because I don't like the way that I'm feeling right now about this sucky, difficult situation that involves suffering. And that's the wrong attitude. It's the wrong attitude to have. You got to embrace the suffering, because when you embrace the suffering, you get to experience highs that you otherwise would not get to experience. Colin O'Brady, I think I shared on the podcast, who spoke at the summit, talks about not wanting to live a life in the zone of what he calls comfortable complacency. He talks about most people, on a scale of 0 to 10 of life experience, 0 being like the worst place they've ever been in, 10 being the most like unbelievable spot that they've ever gotten to live in their life. Most people live between generally a 4 and a 6 on purpose, right? Their lows are not too low, their highs are not too high. They live in this zone of comfortable complacency. And what Colin says is that, everybody wants to experience the 10. He says, I want to experience 10s in my life. I want to experience these moments of just pure bliss, joy, happiness. But the only way to experience 10s is to have experienced a lot of ones, a lot of ones and twos. And so up there on that mountain, I was like, man, when I get to the finish line, this is going to be a story that I'm going to get to remember. This moment of going through this like ridiculous, insane weather situation up here. This is the highlight of the race because this is what I signed up for. I didn't sign up for a 100-mile race to afterwards be like, yeah, that felt easy. That was a cakewalk. No, I signed up for a slugfest, for a slog fest, whatever you want to call it. And it was. I mean, that moment of being up there on the mountain in that torrential downpour where it was difficult to see the course markings, moving along rocks and, trying not to break your legs, having ankle deep water and your feet are soaked. I mean, it was just, the misery was amazing because it's like, man, I'm going to get to experience, a warm shower later. I'm going to get to look back on this and be like, dang, I did that, and James was there with me to like talk about it. Like this is one of those things where it's like, I'm not going to get caught exaggerating in this situation because another friend got to go and experience this with me. Tim Grover has a saying: everything gets easier when you stop expecting it to be easy. Don't expect it to be easy. If you go into a 100-mile race expecting it to be easy, you are going to be sorely disappointed. You got to go into a 100-mile race knowing, hey, at some point, that pain cave is coming. At some point, that moment of suck, that suffering is going to come, that pain, that physical pain, that mental stress is going to become high. And that's the moment that you're looking for. That's why you came out to this thing. That's what your goal is. And so if we're going to set a big goal, it's not going to be easy. Right? Don't go into it expecting like it's fun. It's fun to set big goals and be all rah rah and excited about it. But before you embark on that journey, sit down and say, this is going to be rough. This is going to be a tough ride. So we better buckle up. Better buckle up because it's going to be a wild ride to the finish line. Soak in the suffering. So number 9, soak in the gnarly experiences life sends your way. Finally, number 10, include your friends and family in your dreams. Include your friends and family in your dreams. I really enjoyed getting to experience this weekend with my family, with my in-laws, with my my wife, who's gotten to be there at the Daytona race, but with her there in support, with my kids being there, James coming out to support. I got to talk to my brother John Pat on the phone during one of the sections of the course. The love and support of friends and family is so critical to us. And I have a tendency to not be open in my goals, in my dreams, in my life. I'm not a person that divulges a lot of information. I don't just sit down and open up about things. This is something that I think sometimes drives my wife a little crazy, that I'm not a little bit more of an open book about things that I am planning on or thinking about. I like to believe that maybe I can like kind of sit down and figure out all of the little things in my own head, which is a bad process to have. But it's unhealthy to not share important things with those that are closest to you. And running is an important part of my life. And so being able to share this experience with my wife in particular, my kids, my in-laws, my good friend James, my brother John Pat by phone, the rest of my family was engaged with my wife on text messaging. It was super important to be able to share this kind of big life moment, this big achievement with my family. And so I think it's a reminder that if there are important pieces of our life and we have support members in our community, whether that's our family, our friends, whoever it might be, if there are people that are close to us, we need to communicate to them the things that we're trying to work towards. There's an accountability structure that comes from that. There is an inspiration that comes from that. There is a shared connection that comes through building this. And I definitely feel like uh, coming out of this weekend, so supported by my family in a way that I did not feel going into it. It's not that I felt unsupported going into it, but the amount of kind of like joy and time and energy that came from my wife, from my in-laws, from my kids, from my family, like from James, like this kind of collective push, this collective energy is something that is tangible. Like you can feel the support, and it's just opened up relationship pathways that were not there before. And so the same thing has got to be true in all areas of our life. Again, our spirituality, right? You got to open up those pathways. You got to share your faith with other people. Be more open with God about your what's troubling you. Be real with God. If there's something on your mind, the Psalms are full of lament Psalms of things going horribly wrong in people's lives. And this is a opportunity, this is a prayer that is being offered of like, God, why am I here? How did I get into this spot? Why did you let me fall into this space? What the heck, man? That's the Psalms are full of these great prayers of lament. In our business, we got to get more raw and real with people about what things are going great, what things aren't going great. How can we improve? What are we trying to build towards? Because people want to be there to support. People want to help, but you got to be open about it in order to get that assistance and to get that help. In our, lawyering, in our, being again a better husband, better father, getting raw and open about these things is going to be helpful in achieving these big visions, these big goals that we have, and making sure that we have the support that we need. So, I've shared on the podcast in the past how important it is to put your goals out there, to breathe them into existence by speaking them into existence. You need to include the people that are important in your life, in your dreams, in your plans, in your vision. You want to make sure that you are communicating how important this goal is to you if there is some big thing that you are about achieving. And if you've got supportive people in your life, they're going to do nothing but help you get to that next stage. That's how you recognize your true support people. That's how you recognize the people that have your back in life. And so I felt that support. I felt the support of the people in my world that have my back over this past weekend. And it was just a reminder of how important it is to share those goals, dreams, visions with the people that are going to have the ability to influence that outcome. So number 10, include your friends and family in your dreams. So there you have it. There's 10 life lesson takeaways for you from the Beast of the East. Don't know. I've got another race already on the calendar, so I'm sure I'll probably have another episode coming up on the running front at some point here in the near future. But it'll be in 2024. So only a couple weeks out. Take these life lessons, figure out how to apply them in your own personal space, in your business, in your spirituality. And I look forward to speaking with you again next time.